Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got Kahr's entry into the Micro 9 9mm category, the X9. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis X and Core belts, linked to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links, it will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. And please consider supporting the channel on Player, formerly Utreon, where we can do some types of videos that are no longer allowed on YouTube. This pistol is coming into a category that competes with things like the Hellcat and many of the others that have come out. Kahr's a little bit late getting into this particular market, but there's some things about this that are very similar to other Kahr pistols that would attract people who like the Kahr pistols and not necessarily interested in some of the striker triggers that are out there. This is part of what they're calling their Premium X series. It's the only one in the series currently, but the fact that they're talking about it like that leads me to believe they're probably going to come out with others. Kind of like their current P series, which is their current premium series. Then there's the CW series, which is the less expensive ones. This would fit into that more premium category. It's got a few nice characteristics that differentiate it from the existing ones. It has Picatinny rail, 3-slot Picatinny rail. It has front and rear serrations. The front serrations are actually easy to get a hold of. You'd think that they're a little bit small and they're a little further back, but they actually do work quite well. The rear serrations are also easy to get a hold of. It has ambidextrous slide stop slide release, and it has a reversible mag catch. So a lot of the features that you're looking for today in guns, it does have. It does not have replaceable back straps. That's one feature that it would have been nice if it had. It comes with 2 magazines. It comes with this 10-round flush magazine, which gives you really a 2-finger grip. You do have a nice recess here, so you kind of get up under there, and there's enough of a height. You're not going to get slide bit by this, and of course it's internally striker, so there's no hammer to deal with. The pinky extender mag gives you, depending on the size of your hand, for me it's almost a 3-finger grip, but it's good enough. It does give me basically a 3-finger, a little bit of my finger hangs down. But overall, it's easy to grip, it's comfortable to grip. It's got different texturing on the front strap and back strap, kind of like these little squares, more similar to like a Springfield XDM or a Glock. And then it's got this pebbly texture. It's not a sandpaper texture, it's more of a pebble texture on the sides. And no other texturing, like finger locators or anything else. No texturing on the front of the trigger guard. But it is comfortable. It did stay in my hand. It was easy to hold on to. The grips are a little bit small. I have a tendency to kind of dwarf the whole gun with my hand, but that's typical of these little things. On the other side, it's similar. In the magazine, if you reverse the magazine catch, the magazine button would be here. And the alternate slide stop slide release on this side does work. So I've encountered a few where this side didn't work well. It does on this one. And it worked on both sides. The sights are very characteristic of Kahr. They call it a bar dot. So you have a bar in the center, and then you have the dot, and then there's kind of a groove to act as a locator. I did find the sights pretty easy to use. I had to work at it a little more to shoot this well, not because of the sights or any of the mechanical issues with the gun. It's just tiny. So that you end up with your finger sticking way out to put your fingertip on the trigger. Either that, or you end up with a whole finger through the trigger. The trigger worked well. One thing I did note, I'm going to demonstrate it in a second, is it's actually heavier than some of its predecessors, like the Kahr PM9 that I have here. But it is a typical Kahr trigger, just a little on the heavier side. It came in around 8 pounds, whereas this one, like the Kahr PM9 that you see here, comes in around 5 pounds. Now this gun's got rounds down range. It actually was 5 pound 12 ounces on this one. This does have rounds down range, so it might be a little lighter from that, but I don't think rounds down range is going to move this from an 8 pound trigger to a 5 3/4 pound trigger. I don't think it's going to change that much. So let's go ahead and show you the trigger. This is characteristic of Kahr, so people that like Kahrs are going to like the way this trigger plays out. There's a little bit of take up that you get onto the beginning of a wall, and then you pull through the wall, and then it breaks all the way at the back. Reset is basically all the way out. It's not a false reset. It did actually correctly reset, and then a little take up to get back onto that beginning of the wall, and then a pull through the wall. As striker guns go, it's a little bit longer and heavier than we're used to in things like the Hellcat and many of the others in this segment. But if you're coming from a Kahr PM9, other than being heavier, it's the same basic trigger. So you're going to be used to that. So people that have the Kahr P series, CW series, PM9, P380, and other guns like that are going to be happy that the trigger stayed with what they're used to. If you're coming off something like a Hellcat, you may not like this trigger as much. Internally, it does have the drop safety plunger for drop safety. It does not have an inertial toggle, but the trigger being longer and on the heavy side, it would be very difficult for this trigger to pull itself, on a butt-down drop. So a lot of times I don't like it if they don't have the inertial toggle. On this trigger, the way it's designed and the weight of it, I don't see that as much of a problem as you might on others. Now they do call it a DAO trigger, but I do believe there's a little bit of preload, and the reason for that is if I pull the trigger, it breaks. If I pull the trigger, a true DAO would cycle again. So you do have to cycle the gun, so there's a little bit of preload, which kind of gives it that smoothness, but it's not a true DAO in the context that there's no double strike capability. And that's true of the PM9 and the P380, so that's not a change. It's not a difference in behavior. Dimensionally, I'm going to put the flush mag in. It's 6.125 front to back, 4.375 top to bottom. The slide is 1.0 inches, but when you go out to the largest dimensions, which would be the controls, the biggest part of the gun, then it ends up being 1.15, which is consistent with other guns in this territory. And as you're looking at the top of it right now, you can see that there's a plate here. It is optics ready. It's direct mount. It's a Holosun K-series footprint, and it's a direct mount. Oddly enough, they used flathead screws rather than the typical Torx, which has become really common. That's not a big deal, but make sure that you have a hollow ground screwdriver when you go to take these off so you don't dog ear them. A typical screwdriver probably will dog ear them. And you can see a witness hole for loaded chamber, so that's how the loaded chamber indicator works on this. With the pinky extender magazine, of course, it's a little bit taller. You don't gain any additional rounds, so they're both 10 rounds. Now, I did see out on the web talk about a 15-round extended magazine for this, but I see no reference to it on Kahr's site or its existence. So there's a 15-round magazine rumored to exist, but nothing that I see that substantiates that. The construction of this is stainless steel, the barrel and the slider stainless steel, and of course it's polymer lower. So it's a good quality manufacturing, good quality materials, and well machined. That's very typical of Kahr. They tend to do a good job machining. They call this a blackened matte finish, and I've seen this finish on other cars, and it does seem to hold up quite well. And before I forget to mention it, the barrel is 3.54 inches. It is conventional rifling, which deviates from their existing P series. Like the PM9, the P series tend to be polygonal, and the C series tend to be conventional. This one is conventional. Didn't seem to affect the mechanical accuracy of it. The gun tended to work well. So I'm going to put the flush mag in it, and I'm just going to compare it to some others out there, like the PM9. So you can see it's a little bit taller and a little bit longer than the PM9, but you're picking up 4 rounds. The PM9 only holds 6 rounds at its flush mag, so you're picking up 4 rounds for that little bit of extra size. Comparing it to something like the Hellcat, which is definitely one of its competitors. Now this particular Hellcat has an optic on it, but if you just look at the bodies of it, and I get them lined up correctly, the Hellcat's just a hair shorter when it lines up properly, beaver tail to beaver tail, and roughly the same height. I mean, the dimensional differences between the two are insignificant. The Hellcat has the regular Hellcat has a normal striker fire trigger, shorter, lighter, kind of in the 5-ish pound territory. I did find I had a little bit of work to do because of the length of the trigger and the small size of the gun and the size of my hand. I had a tendency to curl a little bit, so I was grouping a little bit to the left, so I compensated a little bit. I wouldn't say it's a defect in the gun. It's just this tiny thing with a bit longer travel on the trigger and the size of my hand made it a little harder to shoot well. But when I did see my groups, whether the group was exactly where I was trying to place it, I had quite a few rounds that went through basically the same hole. From a mechanical perspective, this thing is accurate. They do advertise a 200-round break-in period, but this one worked from the first round to the last round. We had no malfunctions with it whatsoever. But I will get some more rounds downrange before I try to test it with something like defense ammo and different things, because I'd hate to say it's no good at defense ammo only that I didn't give it a chance to go through the break-in. Break-in period is typical with the Kahr guns. They, that's usually stated in their manual, and a lot of these small guns have a break-in period, so I can accept that. I'm seeing these in the 500 or less territory. The MSRP is $549 on them. So I'm going to show you the takedown. It's really easy. You pull this lever down. You do need to pull the trigger with the slide back, and then it just comes off. So that's an improvement over the popping out pins and things like that. It does have a captive recoil spring, and very, very Kahr-like barrel. This is very similar to what I've seen in other Kahr barrels. It's kind of got a polished feed ramp, and it is offset. And it's got kind of a little loop on this, and this offset is part of how they make the gun small. That's just how Kahr's chosen to solve it. And then you'll see it's well machined, nice and clean, solid, conventional rifling. Internal of the slide, it's dead simple. You got the striker hook and the drop safety plunger. Other than that, everything's clean and well machined. There's really nothing fancy going on in here. And the frame is equally simple. Really large, robust, heavy rails and locking block, and heavy, robust rails at the rear. You can see the sear back there and the disconnector. There's really not much going on in here. And you can see that the slide stop slide release is a nice robust piece of metal on both sides with pivot on both sides, and that's part of why it works reliably on both sides. It's not just an arm coming over and hooking on this side. Really pretty simple. Reassembling it, equally simple. Now the first time I did put this back together, it was a little bit twitchy getting it to line up. We'll see what it does this time. Now this time it lined right up. And flip the lever back. You can either lock it back or just pull it back like I did. Either way. And you're back in operation. Easy to live with, easy to maintain. Depending on the size of your hand, it can be a little challenge to shoot well, but that's not unusual with small little guns with longer triggers. But I think if you're a Kahr fan, you're really going to like this. If you're first time looking at this type of pistol and you're expecting a trigger that's more consistent with what you've seen in the SIG and the Springfields and all the others that are out there, you may find this trigger to be a little different. So you might, unless you're a Kahr fan and have history with Kahr and understand this trigger, you may want to try one just to see if it works well with you. But I didn't find any issues with this, and I do think that with it being very similar in size to the PM9, it's a significant jump up in capacity. It's an update that really I think was overdue, and with the optics ready capability, it brings it into what's currently available in others. One of the big things that might have pushed somebody away from something like that, especially since things like the Hellcat exist, is 6 rounds versus in not much more footprint I get 10, or in the case of Hellcat 11 I believe. So they've brought themselves back current again with a pretty good offering. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click this bell to be notified if you do, and check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Player, and Rumble. We're pretty much everywhere. And thank you.